Greetings, kindred. I am Voivode Maquette. This is our world of darkness, and welcome to Metaplot Monday. So, make yourself comfortable, pour yourself a drink, and let's have a discussion of one of the many intricate little pieces of the puzzle that make up the world of darkness. Today, the Inquisition. Now, the Inquisition could be considered many different things. The militant wing of the Catholic Church against the denizens of the night. A faction within the Sabbat itself. Many things hold the name of the Inquisition, but today we're going to be discussing the event, and more importantly, the lore sheet that 5th edition Vampire the Masquerade has tied into it. Now, if you are interested in purchasing this lore sheet, it does give you quite a few interesting little additives to your character, much like most lore sheets do. And with this, it has a lot to do with more of not making the same mistakes your sire or your grandsire made in the past, or finding a way to do it right. The lore sheet itself has the description, "You know what lit the fires of the First Inquisition that raged from the Middle Ages through to the Renaissance. Perhaps an ancestor spoke in fear of those nights. Maybe you own texts chronicling those terrible times. Or maybe you have designs to recreate them by turning the church against your enemies. Your knowledge of the Inquisition is such that you may have capacity to manipulate the Second Inquisition of tonight. Though their methods and some beliefs have changed, you know how best to evade the group and how to turn them against your foes." I love the fact that this lore sheet exists, simply due to the fact that it proves that even over the centuries, kindred don't change. There are aspects of their life, there are aspects of vampires that have to change. They have to keep with the time in some fashion, even as new generations get embraced. But it shows that even though they sparked a war that led to the death of many of their kind and many others, they're still willing to attempt the exact same thing, even when their enemy has even more power, more allies, and a higher capacity for violence and understanding of what they're truly hunting. It does truly show how dense kindred society can actually be. So, if you invest 1 point into this lore sheet, you get mistakes of the past. You know kindred history and can cite chapter and verse of the domains and princes the Inquisition destroyed in its original incarnation. You can educate any vampire on the Inquisition's historic dangers. Once per story, you can ask a storyteller for 1 piece of information regarding the original Inquisition. As a person who enjoys playing lore masters in general, this specific one is fun because given proper social interactions, you can convince others that they are doing the wrong thing, that throwing their childer at the Inquisition is not going to help. Sending the Inquisition itself at their enemies is also not going to help. That eventually everything gets tracked back down to them. And you can cite, word for word, giving examples of princes and locations of those princes, where things went wrong in the past. That does not mean anyone's going to listen to you, but you have a better way of backing that up. Investing 2 traits into the First Inquisition lore sheet gets you names of the guilty. Your knowledge of vampires and Inquisition relations extends to include kindred manipulators. Though most are dead these nights, many of their descendants survive, and they are at risk of blackmail for their sire's treacheries. Once per story, you can ask a storyteller for the name of one descendant of these traitors in your domain, if there is one. I don't see how there could not be one, first off. As a storyteller, please understand that I say this. There were 60 vampires at the Convention of Thorns. Those are the representatives, and it was considered a mass meeting of kindred at the time. The individuals who were involved during the Inquisition are going to be the anarchs, who were the victims, and everybody else who can be blackmailed. There's no reason why a storyteller should not be able to come up with someone who would want the deeds of their ancestors, or even the deeds of just an NPC, out of the public eye. I don't see how this could be used very easily in an Anarch game, because the Anarchs understand that their whole existence is based on the shucking of their shackles and burning the elders to their core. But in a Camarilla game, this 2-point lore sheet merit can be used in such horrible ways that will gain you an enemy. Do not doubt that. But if you're playing this game right, shouldn't you already have some? 3 traits placed into this lore sheet gets you the Sect of St. James. You have contacts who consider themselves Old Inquisitors. The Secta Sanctus Lecomos harbors a deep resentment for their fancy, modern counterparts, acting with greater fanaticism and suicidal zeal than their more controlled Second Inquisition. Their Abbey is a 4-dot contact, whom you can contact once per story. This actually brings a thought to me, and perhaps I'm misreading this, perhaps I'm misunderstanding it, but to me, the Sect of St. James tells me that there is a group of Inquisitioners from the First Inquisition who have been embraced. That there were vampires in these knights that were members of the Inquisition. Maybe they were Jesuit priests or just paid hunters. But the idea that some of them were embraced and now are resentful towards the new guard is hilarious to me. And also the idea of them not truly turning against their beliefs, but thinking that the new Inquisition has it easy and they need to rough some things up just to make it difficult for them. That's highly amusing to me, and I hope somebody uses that in my games eventually. 4 points is the second act. You have a contact within the Second Inquisition or the local Catholic archdiocese, a file clerk, scout hunter, exorcist, armorer, etc. You have no power over them, but you know how to pump them for information, or prime them with disinformation, if need be. This could be used in such fun ways. Just being able to keep tabs on where the Inquisition is going to be striking, make sure that they don't know where the Elysiums are. Feeding them false information, but also using the proper information that you're getting from them as a way to fight back. That is teetering on a very, very fine line. This could definitely be 4 points that you only get to use once. 5 points will get you the Black Spot. You have identified a location within your domain that the Second Inquisition fears to tread. Once per story, if you or anyone targeted by the Second Inquisition hides out in this location, the hunters call off the search. This anomaly seems to be a blessing, but it does throw up the question: what is so holy or unholy about this place that it deters the greatest threat to kindred tonight? That is very interesting, just knowing that there's a spot. And this is something that you could learn over time in game. This is something that you could earn. that picking up the scouting routes, the patrols, finding out where the Inquisition refuses to go is very interesting. Could you imagine if there was a spot deep in a park that you notice that the Inquisition, if you're following them, or if you've used the second act merit on top of this one, that they tend to scout around, that they will not go into. And then one day you just decide that you're going to run full force into that while trying to escape. Yes, it would be very interesting to watch them put a hand up, put their guns down, and go, move out, search over. But at what cost? You could very well have run into a cairn. That'd be terrifying. Running into a werewolf den. Or maybe it's an area where they feel that the holy ground is so sacred that there's no way you could actually survive. Perhaps the act of them just putting their guns down and putting it in God's hands would be enough to cause holy damage to you. Interesting things. I personally have not used the Inquisition much in my games. It is something that I do plan on using the Second Inquisition now that it's here, now that it's available. But the Inquisition to me has always been a bedtime story. It's always been a tale of the past. It's something that your sire tells you to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes. Of course, to me it sounds like a threat. As in, if you screw up too much, I'll throw you to the Inquisition. That is an interesting thought. I am interested in knowing what you think about the Inquisition and what exactly it can be used for in your game. Not the Second Inquisition, that's obvious. The whole First Light or Project Twilight or whatever you wish to call it is out there. They are still hunting. There are humans out there, both church and government agents, who are hunting the kindred, who are helping keep the Masquerade, mind you, because they don't want any normal humans getting in their way from doing their jobs. But with the First Inquisition, what exactly could that call for in a game? It's not just all memoriam, although a memoriam game set in the Inquisition could be quite fun, allowing your players to play vampires in a memoriam session to let them let their inner wild child out, where the game is not to survive because they know their characters are going to die, so they might as well have fun getting them killed. That's always fun. But where does the Inquisition sit in your game? Does it come up very often? Because it should. That was a hell of a time for those kindred, who probably are not even around anymore to express what happened. There's always the threat looming in the distance, the whispered conversations in Elysium. I like to keep an elder around, one elder who tends to be fighting off the beckoning. And I do that because I like having these stories. I like having these cautionary notes that can be given from time to time. Please comment down below with your thoughts on the Inquisition and how it can affect the modern knights in 5th edition Masquerade, or even in 20th anniversary edition. It doesn't really matter. The Inquisition is in both, because it is, of course, a historical event. And Vampire the Masquerade is, of course, a modern game that tends to brush along the historical. I am Voivode Maquette. This has been our World of Darkness, and we've just discussed the lore sheet for the First Inquisition. Have a good evening.